Okay, I think we're going to get started. Um, Welcome, everybody. My name is Jordan Smoller. I'm based here at Mass General Hospital, and I am co-director of our Center for Suicide Research and Prevention at Mass General Brigham and Harvard. And I am, along with my co-director, Professor Matthew Knock, who I'll introduce in a moment, just thrilled that we are able to bring this to you today. This session, which is of just the utmost importance, and we are so thrilled that we've been able to bring together really some of the leading experts in the nation to discuss this project and sorry, to discuss this topic with you and have a chance to learn together. So, Matt, do you want to say a word about our center as well?
Yes, thanks so much, Jordan, for kicking us off, and thank you to everyone for joining and viewing. So my name is Matt Knock, and I'm a professor at Harvard and research scientist at Mass General Brigham and Boston Children's and Franciscan Children's, and really excited to have you all with us today. Our center, which is generously funded by a grant from the National Institute of Mental Health, is a practice-focused suicide research and prevention center, with the focus really being on practice. We conduct research, we support research, we disseminate research, but our focus is really on trying to make a difference and trying to improve the tools that clinicians have to try and better understand, predict, and prevent suicide, and to provide outreach and information to people in our society. And that brings us to today's meeting. We're really focused on trying to not just enhance research, but provide information to people about how we could better support each other, how we could better support folks who are struggling with suicidal thoughts, and how we can help support ourselves when we're struggling with suicidal thoughts. And so the topic of today's meeting is one that's relevant, I know, to each and every one of us. And so we're excited to be able to focus on this and excited to have you join us. I'll pass it back to Jordan.
Thanks, Matt. I think we should go ahead and jump right in. And I am thrilled to turn it over to our moderator today, Kate Spear, who helps run the Public Health Creator Program at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health and is also a mental health activist and writer. And Kate, I'm going to turn it over to you, and thanks so much for doing this.
It's woo, it's an honor. So thank you for having me, and really thank you for hosting this. I am a suicide survivor, and I lost a number of friends in my 20s when I was in and out of psych wards struggling with intermittent psychosis. And so I just want to say a massive thank you for the work you do, for hosting this webinar, and then also just for holding space for all of us and fighting so hard for people like me. Um, Additionally, I want to thank all of you who have joined today. If I cry, it's totally normal. I'm in therapy, I'm totally safe. It's just you are showing up right now, and that matters. Um, a lot of people don't understand how powerful that is. And for you to carve out this hour today and show up and say that you care enough to learn and grow towards helping, that's tremendous. And so I really want us to just take a second and honor that, because it really is what makes the most difference. It is exactly what Matt and Jordan just said. It's that practice of showing up and being here. Um, and now I have the esteemed honor. I still don't understand how I get to be with all of these rock stars. To be honest, I feel way more comfortable in a psych ward. um, but I'm going to turn it over to our incredibly talented panelists for them to introduce. But just before doing so, I do want to be really upfront that today's conversation is going to be honest, because honesty is kind. But along with honesty comes hardship. And we will be using real language about suicide, self harm, and the repercussions of such hardships. And so, if at any time, whether for you or the people you're sitting with, this becomes too much, I want you to choose you today. I want you to either dial 988 or go join community and take care of yourselves, because that matters most. And now I'm going to turn it over to our panelists for them to introduce their incredible selves.
Thanks, Kate. I think I'm up first. It's great to be here with you and with my esteemed colleagues, Tony Pisani and Dave Jobs, Jordan and Matt, and most importantly, all of you who've joined with us today. I couldn't agree more with Kate that this is about all of us, about human experiences, and this is really for you and meant to be useful. Um, my name is Christine Moutier, and I serve as the Chief Medical Officer at the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. I'm a psychiatrist by training, and I'm full-time in the work of suicide prevention with my colleagues at AFSP and more broadly, because I am a clinician, but actually my path to focusing on this relates to much more personal experiences with struggle myself, and then the loss of colleagues, physicians and nurses, where I was at an academic institution for the first, kind of decade and a half of my career, and have family and friends with ongoing mental health struggles and including experiences with suicide. So, I think what I bring to this conversation is kind of a 360 experience. AFSP is also the leading private funder of suicide research, so we live and breathe both lived experience, loss survivors, as well as the science, and it's all very integrated together. And I think just to end my introducing myself part is just to say that I notice that in society there's different paces of progress that's being made. Some places, families, faith orgs, schools are just zooming ahead and really understanding that suicide is a human health issue, that these are common experiences that we can talk about, and there are ways to support each other at the family, peer, and clinical treatment levels. And then there are many, many people and places where they'll talk about more about their mental health, but they kind of leave out the suicidal ideation or suicide attempt piece because there still seems to be this kind of sense that that's something we can't talk about or whatever it relates to as far as myths and stigma from the past. So we really want to break through all of that and have this very authentic conversation. So again, thanks, Kate.
Oh, thank you. I couldn't agree more. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Dave.
So good morning. I'm really so delighted to be here. I really feel like this is an under explored topic, which I'm so delighted to be invited to do this. I'm a clinical psychologist by training and a professor at Catholic University in Washington, D.C. And my area of research is in clinical suicidology, and I developed an intervention called the Collaborative Assessment and Management of Suicidality, or CAMS, and we do clinical trials. But I'm also a practitioner, and part of being a practitioner is oftentimes encountering families and loved ones who are concerned about their kids or their partners or their close friends, and not knowing what to do. And so that to me is really a compelling thing and focus for this particular presentation. So I've been in the field since grad school. I've got about 40 years of experience, and really feel passionately about this topic and about our focus today. Thanks.
Wonderful. Yeah, what you do is incredible. So thank you. And Tony, last but certainly not least.
Thanks, Kate. Um, we don't know how to prevent every suicide, but there are things that we can do and say to help. And so that's what my career has been devoted to, different settings, healthcare, military, education settings, trying to make the things that we can do or say um, practical and memorable so that in the moment they're there for the people who are trying to support others. And so that happens through research and through working with many health systems in here and abroad. So I'm also really glad to be here and looking forward to learning from you, Christine and Dave, as I always do, and from the questions that the group has. And thanks, Kate, for that beautiful introduction.
Oh, I take no credit. Credit is all of yours, backing me up. So this is life is a team sport. Well, clearly we have such an incredible wealth of knowledge. So we're going to dive right in. The way we've structured today's incredible conversation is to really talk through some of the most common questions that all of us actually receive regularly. And our hope today, of course, with no presumption, is that some of them can offer something that honors you, that meets you where you need to be met in your own trenches. So I want to start with what we're asked. I'm asked probably a week 500 times, which is, how do I know something's wrong? Which is a beautiful and heartbreaking question because it's so complicated. Who would like to dive in with that?
Well, I could kick us off just because I think that oftentimes, because most of us are socialized to present well and strong, and when you're struggling with your mental health, oftentimes it's not breaking through to the individual, to myself, that this is a health issue I'm experiencing. And so those old beliefs and that probably primitive instinct of just zipping it up and like actually withdrawing from friends and family can kick in. And some people are really good at continuing to function despite significant struggle and suicidal thoughts. And therefore, when somebody attempts or dies by suicide, it can feel like it has been completely out of the blue with just a huge vexing question of how did that happen? What was the path to that experience or that tragic loss? And so I have learned that it can look like so many different things, but that really for everyday people or whatever hat you wear in your life, that the key would be kind of dialing up the sensitivity on your radar so that you're noticing. And so even for those who are really zipped up, there are little nuanced sort of tells that are happening. And I think in our society, part of the other message we've all maybe grown up with is that stress is so pivotal and so relevant. And it is, but that doesn't mean that we should write off whatever might be presenting itself in a person's speech or behavior, the changes that you're noticing, even if there's stress going on in their life. There's always stress going on in all of our lives, waxing and waning. And so I really take a very broad view of looking out for nuanced behavior change that doesn't seem characteristic for the person, and moving in closer to that and having a conversation with them instead of like talking about them with, certainly having a team in place is important, but someone also needs to speak directly with the person lovingly and, in a supportive way.
I love that. Yeah, and I think that's so accurate, that dialing up. I've never heard that phrase so accurately, like dialing up that awareness. And I wonder for people who might not be as familiar with what stress can look like, who might not even know, what would the signs be for a wide swath of how pain can manifest in a human. I wonder if Dave, you could speak, or Tony, you could speak to like what are certain behaviors that we've seen kind of traditionally throughout that would be markers for, hey, like I really need to be paying attention.
Yeah, to pick up on Christine's idea, I think there are suicides, and I've certainly experienced this personally and professionally, that do come out of the blue, that are shocking, that really were hard to see coming. But there are, I would say, probably in my experience, the majority of suicides, when you do the psychological math, you know something isn't quite right. And that speaks to, I think, what Christine's saying about kind of dialing in. And then I think the big barrier, which we're going to get to, is, do you ask? And I would say it's hard to save lives if you don't ask. So I think it's a matter of sort of saying, gosh, there's a lot of things going wrong. They seem to be distressed. They're withdrawing. There's so many ways that people give these subtle clues or sometimes overtly say things that we should be attentive to and then ask in as direct way possible.
Oh,
I'm you, Tony.
So this is my first Zoom meeting. Uh, the, the one of the things that I think a lot of times people need a kind of like a ramp into that asking that Dave is talking about. And there's a couple of different ways that you can have that kind of ramp. I mean, one is that when somebody is talking about something that went wrong or not, or feeling upset or down, one way is to ask, even if is just to ask, how bad is this? How bad has this got? Um, I think another is to, in general, in your life, not be afraid to talk about your own struggles. I think, Kate, you were exemplifying that as you opened us today. But I think people tend to be more open with somebody if they know that they also have shared their struggles. So how bad has it gotten? I'm also talking about my own. The other is, I think, we don't, although there are some signs of distress, we're actually conducting a large study right now trying to identify what really are warning signs, which have never actually been fully identified. Like what are the day before kind of signs? That's led by Dr. Ken Connor and Courtney Baggy, who's at the University of Michigan. But they're really hard to tell the difference from someone who's just upset from somebody who might have thoughts about suicide. So I do think delving in, asking about how bad is this? Has this ever, are what we know from research that somebody's worst day depression indications are some of the best indications of the sort of best predictors of somebody having suicidal behavior. So maybe just asking about how is it on the, so what's been the worst day of this? Kind of drawing on what we know from the measurements of suicide. So how bad has it gotten? So what's been the worst of this? And then being open yourself.
I love that so much. Yeah, I think one thing that I just want to add before diving into how we can move into how we support people is, and this is just a personal vignette, my parents actually used to take one of those Audubon calendars that they would get sent and track. I know this sounds a little bit wild, but kind of my mood over time. So when I was struggling with chronic suicidality, my manifestations of pain were binge eating, withdrawing, not responding to emails, getting behind in homework. That can look like any number of things. It could, for other people, it could be drinking a lot. It could be going out even more and never sleeping. There's so many manifestations of how pain shows up. But what my parents used to do, and I didn't even know this, was they would literally tick with a permanent pen the days where it would happen. And so they would be able to track how many times I was calling them hysterical from college about these bad days. And when the bad days stopped being every other and started to be every day, they would generally start to have conversations like, how bad is this? Are you sharing everything? Is it time to go in? And that was just a way for them to have a visual trajectory, because generally the symptoms get worse and worse over time. And for any individual, it could be any manifestation. But it was one way that they were able to find some structure of sanity, I think, as they lost sleep night after night. And so I just wanted to offer that in case that's useful. I want us now to move, obviously, into how do we support people? So maybe we don't know exactly how they're doing, but what does support look like? And what does that mean? I know we've already mentioned the idea of how bad has this gotten and how are you doing and talking about it. But I'd love for us to dive into some really practical steps about what that could look like.
I like to think about the barriers that keep people from doing that caring, warm approach first, to just really kind of make it real and think this through. Because I know even in my own life, as much as I'm passionate and entrenched in this topic, when the rubber meets the road in real relationships, in the home or in the work environment, it feels very different than when we talk about sort of best practices. And there's oftentimes just so many different things that you often will think, am I really the one to, who am I to approach them? I'm just a coworker, or, they have this best friend, so it really should be coming from someone else. And the truth is, what we say at AFSP and throughout our chapter network is assume you're the only one who is noticing. Trust your gut instinct and reach out. Um, there are probably many other reasons people tend to shy away from it, just fear of making it worse, not having the exact words to say or the skill set, feeling like, well, I'm not mental health trained. So some of those worries that people have. And then I think, lastly, I'll just mention that we may worry about how it will be received because we haven't all grown up in environments where the conversations can be at this deeper level. Um, and so what I'll say from my own experience and from, that of so many now is that number one, it's safe, and research shows it is safe during the course of a caring conversation, not opening with it probably, but during the course when it feels relevant to ask about suicidal thoughts. That is safe to do. And I think the only other thing I would say is set up the conversation in a respectful way with privacy in mind. This isn't a hallway, quick in passing type of conversation. I will, if the circumstances are ideal, I'll try to set it up even in advance, like a coffee chat, something that, and even to tell them, I'm wanting to meet with you because I'm just noticing you don't seem like yourself, and I really want to be able to support you in the best way I can. And then when you're actually sitting with the person, I think reiterating that there is no judgment. In fact, this is a judgment-free zone. It, I'm doing this because I care, and I want to learn more about what you're experiencing because that's I care and I want to be able to be the best coworker, friend, parent, whatever the relationship is. So I think keeping it very, very open-ended as a starting point, if they will start talking about what's going on in their life as they're experiencing it, that to me is the key that opens all the opportunity for supporting and um, helping them kind of think through whatever it is, the timeline or what has been helping. Are there other things there they can think of to, diminish the sort of negative influences and to augment the positives? But also it doesn't need to be a solution focused conversation even in the beginning, especially. It really should be more of just listening and validation of their pain. I think that is something that none of us are really trained, and so it's kind of hard to come by that kind of conversation in our modern day realities, or maybe even throughout history. But I think that the beauty of this kind of conversation is that you're not going into it because you're sure that they're at risk for suicide. You're going into it because you notice something and you care and you're curious. Um, and and I just think about what we all crave in this modern day society we live in is deeper relationships, authenticity, connection, validation. And this kind of conversation can actually serve that purpose as well, even if they're doing relatively okay, but you've taken the time to reach out and express that concern.
I'll add two things to what Christine said. Where does the start of support begin? I think start is thank you. So anytime somebody shares something with you, thank them.
Yeah.
That goes a really long way. Tell somebody I want to hear more. The other is something I've found both in clinical settings and with my own family is to go to a farther extreme than you even think the issue is. So if somebody tells you something that seems like that's bothering them, uh, try to go like two notches up from that and be like, wow, that sounds excruciating.
Mhm.
When you do that, the person, they can always correct you and be like, no, 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 it's actually not that bad. But if you're showing, hey, I'm willing to hear this even at the far end of painful, it may open up more conversation, and that's what I've found that it does.
Yeah, I mean, a couple points I want to make. As Christine notes, there are several studies showing that asking about suicide doesn't plant a seed. that isn't already there. And it opens the door for discussion. But when you ask, you got to be ready for the answer. And what I mean by that is, especially I think with kids, we're doing a clinical trial, multi-site clinical trial right now with adolescents. And one of the things that we see are parents finding out that their son or daughter is suicidal, and then they have a crisis. But the kids have been suicidal for months. And so what they do is they call the police, or they take them to the ED, or they immediately move to hospitalizing them, which in my view is oftentimes can be an overreach because they're frantic and worried and concerned. So to me, what I would really want to impress is like, be like a lighthouse. I've written about this, but be like a lighthouse. I'm here. I'm gonna, point the light to sort of the rocks and the reef out there. It's a rough ocean, but I'm not going anyplace. And I can tolerate, as Tony said, that Sean Shea calls that amplification. I can tolerate the worst you can bring. And I'm not going to freak out and call the police. I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to validate your experience. And together, I really want to be a part of a solution that feels right for you. And that goes so far. I mean, just listening and not freaking out, which is hard to say, hard to do, and hard to imagine, is half the battle, in my view.
Oh, I love all of these. These are so powerful. I think the emphasis on kind curiosity, I like to call it kind curiosity. The idea that the curiosity is always kind. You can't go wrong. There's no presumption of knowing. And that in addition to just being with them, um, of all of the things that have helped me and all of my friends who I was in and out of psych wards in my 20s, struggling with a misdiagnosis that resulted in psychosis for a decade. Um, the answer we always found was join me in it. Just be here. I don't need an answer because the answer is being together, is someone to weather the storm. And so, just as much as we need you as a lighthouse, we also just need you to hold our hand. Um, and there's nothing kinder and more loving. I now want us to move to what is so tricky, which is the dynamic of you're there, you're loving, you're holding space, and then someone says they don't want help. What do you do?
If I might,
Take a stab at that one.
yeah.
Yeah.
This is a really common thing that I've encountered clinically over the years where, especially like parents of adult children or spouses or friends, will come just for consultation about this exact question. And what I've done is say, imagine 10 years from now, looking back on this time and this relationship and not having regrets. In other words, to use a sports metaphor, leave it all on the field, that you've done everything you can think of to do, and not have regrets. Because I've talked to so many loss survivors who have so many regrets about conversations or opportunities or things that they could have responded to. So, for example, I've advised, I can think of one family in particular where I was like, give him a coping care package with letters and your and resources, and there are really thoughtful books that people have written, that might be a resource, and then just give it to them, and 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 they will look through it. I'm almost guarantee you they'll look through it and they may dismiss it, but you will have done something really in their best interest. Because you can't, and this is a really sensitive topic, but the research shows that when you make people go to the hospital, the outcomes, there's a sort of a meta-analysis type analysis that came out of Australia. The outcomes are not great for suicide. It's much better when somebody seeks treatment for themselves, and not because of other people. And so it's really tough. I get it. But what I would have you do is look back on this time and think about how do I not have regrets about not having done enough or asked the right questions or done everything I could think of to do. Is one way to think about it.
I love that. I love to just add on there. One of the things that was super helpful and just a frame that was, I love you if this is the way you always are, because there is some expectation about the help that it quote fixes you, which implies the need for like the paradigm to be about one's brokenness, when in fact we're all worthy and that worth is innate. And so, for somewhere in that barrier to accessing care, if there can be a frame of unconditional acceptance and love, no matter the frame of self and presentation or season of self the person is living through, that can be particularly compelling, I've seen in a variety of contexts.
Yeah. And I think one of the things around somebody who maybe feels like they don't want help or they're not open to your support. I think one thing is to emphasize that you don't think the problems are easy. So often saying like, I don't know exactly what I don't know what will be helpful here. I'm not even sure what to say. Uh, it's overwhelming to me just to hear about what you're saying, but um, I guess I do because I'm not right in your situation. I can kind of picture that we could, if you were, if you want me involved, we probably could find something together. Um, because I think if it was easy, then the person maybe would have already kind of figured it out themselves. So reflecting in your own way, those are like my way of saying it, but everybody will have their own natural way of saying, like, wow, this is a really hard, I can see why you would feel so awful. This is a really hard situation and there's no easy answers. And it's sort of that plus together plus some hope that from where you sit, there may be a solution.
I'll chime in with another concept because it is so common about not being ready to accept help for a whole variety of reasons, as far as just people are on their own journey of learning and developing insights about what it is they're experiencing. Um, there is a specific situation that can lead to an individual sort of neurologically not being able to see the symptoms or the illness for what it is. And that has a name, a clinical, sort of description, anosognosia. And there is an expert psychiatrist, Dr. Amador, who's written about his experience with his brother with really severe mental illness. I think it was schizophrenia, who over years and years, like seemed like I think it was like decades in the beginning, um, his brother did not acknowledge that there was an illness. Um, these were real experiences to him. It was the world. The delusions were, reality. And the more that Dr. Amador tried to kind of coerce and urge and push towards treatment, the more kind of their relationship dissolved. And of course with angst and frustration and just heartache. And this is common in some of my own friends during this time. It's a really, really challenging thing. Um, so anyway, he developed a method where he kind of turned it upside down. And instead of just coming in with your expert approach, which I think kind of Tony was getting at too, with that humble admission that I don't presume to have all the answers. In this case, it really just starts with forget about what your goal is as the family member or the loved one, or maybe even the clinician, and start with what the individual's goals are and really sit with that and allow that to be the frame, probably possibly for a long time. And what he says is until they ask you for advice, that's your ticket into then moving into more solution focused, your own next steps and where you think they should go. But I think it's a very this is about relationship dynamics as well. And kind of in a way that yin yang, that when one person is just insistent on one way or coming in really hot and strong and they never let up, the other person in the relationship will naturally just pull back. It's sort of like that thing. And so you're balancing out that dynamic in a way. But anyway, it is in a book so that if this is of interest, if that's, describing kind of your family situation, I do highly recommend it because it is a very concrete set of like ways to change the dynamic and the conversations.
I love that. And my parents actually used it with me.
Oh, how
Yeah.
interesting.
So there was times where my psychosis was so bad that I didn't really know um, what was going on. And my parents used to just join me there and ask me what I wanted. And all I wanted, I said, was to graduate college. And they said, okay, we're going to try to figure that out with you. And so they would meet me continually in my agency. And there was nothing more powerful than someone believing I had the power to change. Because a lot of times the assumption is this top-down effect that the practitioner or the therapy or whatnot is going to quote be the solution. But when my parents started acting like I was the solution, it made me believe that maybe I was. And I went in and got on Haldol and went back to school 3 weeks later. So
Well, Kate, the operative thing there is with you, that your
exactly,
parents were with you. And so, to me, this is, I mean, clinicians face this all the time. There are people
totally.
that refer to me that don't want to see me. And so a lot of what I work with in that kind of dynamic, it's not exactly the same, but it can be similar. It's like the Chinese puzzle that Christine's describing, where you're pulling apart and you can't escape. You have to like work with the resistance. And it's not a word I like, but there are reasons that people are resistant. When you recognize that and work with it, you get in less of an adversarial, this is what you should do. I oftentimes take like everything to gain, nothing to lose kind of argument in a gentle way. The thing we'll probably get to is though there's treatment and then there's treatment. And I'm a strong believer in things that actually work and been proven by evidence in randomized controlled trials. So I think what we're talking about is staying present to this person and sending the message, I'm not giving up on you. No matter how bad it gets, I am not giving up on you. I'm right here. And that's what I hear your parents did with you, and that makes all the difference.
It really did. That's why I'm here today. And I think that takes us nicely into the next question, which is I am overwhelmed by this all the time. How do I manage continually? And this to this day is one of my greatest concerns is the caretaker burden that we have right now with this reality that being there in the excruciating with your loved one without support is really hard. So, how do you all recommend and how do you all see really thoughtful structures for how individuals can navigate this on a chronic, more continual, long term basis?
There's probably different strategies depending on what hat people are wearing. For clinicians, this is obviously one that's also very, very relevant and keeping oneself, um, you know, in it and refreshed and hopeful and not so burned out that the almost the contagiousness of hopelessness can become a thing in therapy or just the health consequences to the clinician. I know that for myself as a parent, when my kids are now in their mid-20s, and thankfully they're doing well now and actively managing mental health and different things. But there was a time when that wasn't dialed in yet, and it was very, very tumultuous. And Kate, you're talking about those phone calls to your parents. That was a reality for myself and my husband. And so I think there were a few things I learned by kind of walking through those periods myself. And one was to find a team so that it is not all on you. And that team can include your loved one's clinician, their mentors, teachers, like other, loving, trusted adults in their life. Um, Even when in their younger years, this was a thing. There would be a special teacher or coach in addition to their pediatrician and psychiatrist. And and of course, any other, like, your partner. If you are in a partnered situation, trying as best as possible to be on the same page with your partner if it's about a child or a loved one that you're both, involved with. That is one of the most challenging things, but I think with effort and even maybe couples therapy or whatnot, um, it's worth it because it can be so divisive and so challenging. And just, the normal basic advice about carve out time for you to do other things so that this is not the entirety of your time and energy. Um, because, there's such hard choices along the way, but um, just hovering continuously, it fretting and while you're spiraling down yourself is not going to help your loved one. You have to be really able to be healthy and coming at this with creativity and compassion.
Maybe one other angle that I think the very first comment in the chat from Christopher Frazier was that he was praying for our work, and that really meant a lot. And I do think that there is something of a sense of calling to being somebody's support person who may struggle for a really long time. And I think sometimes that sense of purpose, you do have to have balance, for sure in your life and that self-care. But I think sometimes it really helps people to know and remember, like, that person you're in that person's life, I believe, for a reason. And that can be sustaining sometimes. I know that's true when people are caring for parents or they're caring for a friend. And so I just would encourage anybody who's in that situation, in addition to taking care of yourself, all the things, I think to remember, like, we don't get that many opportunities to be, to offer human support and love to somebody who is hurting, and you've been given one. And I know I hope that doesn't sound too, pie in the sky, but I really do believe it's an important purpose. And it can provide some solace in addition to other things.
What am I
Yeah.
saying?
Oh,
I'm sorry,
please.
Kate.
Yeah.
Just one
No,
quick thought.
please.
In our clinical trial with teens, one of the things that we've really leaned into is a stabilization support plan for parents, which is a set of marching orders, so to speak, about lethal means safety at the home and then ways they can support the treatment. And because our treatment is very person focused, it's focused on the child, it's so powerful when you watch the videos like we do for research, when the clinician says, I got the suicide issue, your job is to support the treatment. And here's some guidance as to how you do that. And so that to me is a really important part of a effective intervention, is that the people that are supporting this person have clarity about how they best support the treatment and their loved one.
Yeah, it's a really good one, Dave. Because I think I saw maybe like 30 to 40% of people in this room right now are healthcare providers of some kind. And so we're often talking to people about safety plans. Um, but I've seen so many safety plans that say, I'll talk with, Uncle Fred, but like Uncle Fred has no idea about this. So if you are in that role where you're making more of a kind of a support plan, whether as a just a supportive friend or family member or in a professional role, if you make a plan that involves somebody else supporting, they need their own too.
Yeah.
So real. I used to, in college, I would walk in and hand my professors a binder. And I was like, hi, my name is Kate. I have serious mental illness. I live with intermittent psychosis. Love to set up a time with your office hours. And here's a binder of everything you need to know. And it used to just have a full thing. And the first page was, how do you take care of yourself? Because I realized that they had to do the work of caring for me, that they first had to do the work for caring for themselves. And it was one of the things that my professors to this day still write me. They're like, you are the wildest card we've ever had. We're so grateful you're still alive and rocking. But I, to this day, remember that you made me figure out what is my safety plan first before we went through yours. And I think calling that out is great because it really is truly powerful when we're able to put that into practice. I now want to pivot us into questions from the audience. We have some incredible questions. We clearly have a wonderful community here today. I want to start with the question of, how do you know when it's time to go to the emergency department versus not freaking out and just listening? And I love the framing of this because I think it's so honest. And I just want to say it's also okay to freak out, just maybe not with that individual. And sometimes expressing those needs with your own therapist is important. Holding space for that whole truth is key. But I'd love for you guys to take a stab. What is the kind of best practice for when to pursue admittance versus when to hold space and maybe take measures and safety measures at home or something in kind?
Well, I'll jump on because of the freaking out idea is mine, or it's something I raised earlier. It's
Yeah,
easier said than done, and
exactly.
I really do get that. But if your reaction to somebody sharing this deep, dark secret is like, "Oh my God," and you get dysregulated yourself, that's not going to land well with this person that just took a big risk with you. So I would say within reason, to try to metabolize it and just be with this person and be with the heaviness of this topic. Um, I'm not a huge fan of emergency departments, and there's research to this effect. We do research in the emergency department, and I'm a big fan of empath units, which are an alternative, to chaotic emergency department care. But I do think if you feel like that something extreme must happen because this person is determined and has access to lethal means, then I think it is necessary. But I think for me that's a very high bar versus the first response. And I think too often it's the first response versus just hang out with this, be able to try to be with it. And if it just becomes utterly intolerable, that might be your cue.
And don't hesitate to call 988 in that
Yeah.
hanging out period of time where you're struggling with what do I do? Because that is a really tough call for even if you are a clinician, you're not your family member's clinician. And so we don't have that same objectivity and furthermore like local areas have different kinds of resources, so 988 can help you figure that out, because like Dave just mentioned, an empath unit or mobile crisis or respite centers or crisis centers, those are all more community-based, more human-centered experiences for people who are in crisis, and but not all cities have them. So I would just add that into the mix. I think we're moving hopefully away from a period where pediatricians and primary care docs, just as a knee-jerk reflex, would send patients to the ER if they mentioned suicidal thoughts in an outpatient visit. That should not happen, and I agree with Dave on that. But it is a matter of building policies and practices and training so that clinicians, but also so the whole clinic staff, this is on a, to me, this is a health system responsibility to kind of a priori come to terms with. And I mean, all of us are involved with this kind of work with health systems. So it shouldn't be on the clinician to kind of figure it out in the moment. That's not what we're talking about here.
To add to what's been said, I think, if you do decide to go, there's a couple of circumstances. Like if a person is like really intoxicated and you're just feeling like we can't have a conversation, I'm really just super worried about that, or um, they or you're just like, I don't think I can leave this person alone, but I can't stay here any longer. Those would be some things. But I think most of all, it would be to go in with realistic expectations for yourself and to the person. You can set that person up and the treating staff up for disappointment. If you say, look, that's where we can get help. We can get help there. So could just come with me. We'll talk with somebody. We'll be able to see a psychiatrist. We can get help. And I think people are not always aware that, going there could be a long wait. We might have to wait for a long time. We're going to have to tell what's going on a few different times. I would say we're going to bring food with us, and set the right expectation. I don't think this is going to solve everything, but we just need something to kind of just we just need something else right now. This is probably not the right exact 100% thing, but we need something else because I'm just so worried right now. And I think that's an appropriate use of it, in addition to the other resources like Christine and Dave both mentioned, and I'm 100% on board, like use all the other ones you can first. But if you do have to, just be aware of what it'll contain, because if you don't let that person know that, then they may become very upset when they get there,
Yeah.
and they have to, you know, hand over certain belongings. In some settings, they have to change their clothes. There's a lot of things that may happen, and you don't want somebody to be in a especially if there's if they're angry or this person has maybe been aggressive before. You want to make sure that we're being really honest, even though we kind of want it to be something else. We can just be really honest about what it is, and then use it when you need to.
That is so refreshing. You're actually the first person who's ever brought up the expectations. And I'm just so grateful for it because I think the assumption is you walk in and it's like you get put in comfy jammies and you're just like sung a lullaby. And actually, you're locked in a metal room and forced to strip and given a gown. And then you tell your story, it's usually 5 to 6 times over the course of 10 to 24 hours. And then you only get a bed if there's a bed available. And that's not to say it can't be tremendous. For me, when my psychosis was super bad and it coincided with extreme suicidality, it was a choice I made because I didn't trust that I would make it to tomorrow. And it was the absolute necessary solution to de escalate that psychotic break. Again, I also had lots of friends who had a very different approach, but I love that frame of being like, we're going to go together. We're going to bring food. We're going to bring your pajamas because they're not going to give you them. And we're going to weather this. But I love in all of these conversations just how much space you guys are encouraging to be held, that nuance that we don't know that we're here with you. And I wonder if we could pivot that into this next question, which I think brings up some really fascinating dynamics that we haven't actually gotten into thus far. Do you have any advice on how a son can approach the topic with their mother when they're going through this? So this is an example where the mom has thoughts of suicide and she's really feeling like a complete burden and doesn't want to talk about it further. And the son is understandably very worried.
I just want to make a plug for a book that Stacy Friedenthal wrote, called Loving Someone with Suicidal Thoughts. And I wrote the forewords, but that's no reason to buy it because it's a really good book that talks about what to say, what not to say, all the different kinds of dynamics, all the different resources. And this webinar is also listing all these resources for the audience as well, which is great because there's no clear clearinghouse for what do you do. But Stacy wrote this brilliant book, as she is inclined to do, about this kind of thing. I don't know if she has a particular chapter about a son with a mother, but she probably does. I mean, or something akin to that. And she's a person with lived experience herself, and she's also a researcher and a leading mental health advocate. So I'd recommend that book for anybody. It has a lot of these questions because it just walks you through so many of these scenarios in thoughtful ways.
I'll just say two things. One, another resource. In fact, Dave used the words before, here with you. So since we only have 2 minutes, I will say that this is a no cost training to learn more than what we can say in 2 minutes about your situation, skills to help somebody, and those are going to be linked. But one thing is the concept of like saying the thing that you're afraid of is often can make it less scary. So I don't know the dilemma in this specific situation, but it might be just like, as your son, I feel like really like I'm afraid I'm intruding, or I don't know if you even want to hear this from me. Like just say all those things that are making you feel, and then all of a sudden it kind of feels more natural to then go ahead and say it.
Yeah.
So we sometimes call that when in doubt, tell the truth, meaning when in doubt, say what you're worried about. Like, I'm afraid they're going to be offended. So then say, I'm afraid you're going to be offended, so I didn't even want to say this. And it kind of inoculates it a bit.
So powerful. Thank you. All right, it looks like we have about 5 more minutes. So I'm going to jump into a few other, try to get 2 more questions in. All right, we're going to power through this, team. All right. One, do you have any thoughts about people that might be minimizing their symptoms versus others that are maximizing or maybe perceived as attention seeking? Are you worried about one versus the other? And I think I'd love to hear also what the research shows for everyone to better understand this. I think it's widely talked about, especially online right now.
I have kind of a strong view about the idea of attention seeking, because I have sort of learned to neutralize this idea that some are being manipulative and some have real, suicidal thoughts or risk. That's not the truth. That's just not how it works. We all are wired differently. We're all trying to manipulate our environments to get our needs met. And people are doing that in the best way they know how. And so it's all real. So I know that can be frustrating for clinicians when there is chronic behaviors and so forth, or if a personality disorder is in the mix. But yet I think we have developed some unfortunate kind of pejorative ways of categorizing that are just not fair, they're not accurate, and they're not humane. And so giving people the benefit of the doubt that their distress is real and starting from there.
Yeah, my closest lived experience collaborator, Christina Zurich, said when somebody asked her, "Do you think people talk about suicide to get attention?" She said, "Yeah, they probably do, but I think the question is not are they? The question is why are they?" And maybe try to look behind the question.
And also they need attention, they need support. That's great if they're trying to draw that, the converse is often true, that people are kind of minimizing and not asking for help, and we want people to more.
I couldn't agree more with Christine and Tony. To me, a thread that runs through this whole discussion is fear. And the fear that I can't make you do, those person I care about, I can't make you do what I want you to do, which is not take your life, is ubiquitous and pervasive and sort of at the basis for so much of what we're discussing. But the field gets in this position of talking about resistance. And as Christine said, it's really pejorative and not helpful at all. Resistance is reasons. It's reasons that I'm overstating my distress or I'm understating it. And those reasons are, in my view, almost always legitimate. And we need to honor them and listen to them and find out about them versus label them or be pejorative.
And I actually don't know off the top of my head about research about
I
whether
don't
people
either.
one or the other is more likely, but there probably might be some. It's just as I don't know it, but we could look into that and see if we can answer that part of it directly as
Right.
well.
Wonderful. Um, I fear we are at time. I wanted to get another one, but I just want to thank our incredible panelists, of course, the center, Jordan and Matt, and all of that they are doing, and then all of you. And I wanted to end by just saying that we will be sending out a follow-up email with all of the resources that were discussed today, in addition to others. And if anyone has any closing remarks, I want to give them a chance to say them, just because I know I just said we were getting another question. So if you guys have anything to add just before closing, just let me know.
My only thought is we can't get to everything, and I feel bad about that, and maybe there can be more discussions, because I saw some of the comments and questions, and they're fabulous, including about culture and race, ethnicity, and different diagnoses and experiences.
I feel the same. I think this is an incredible resource in itself, and I'm really glad that you folks put it on, and the resources that are available and connected to this are going to be really helpful to folks.
Yeah, and I just want to thank you, Kate, for leading us so nicely, and appreciate the chance to be here.
Well, you all are a gift to all of us, and we will follow up with all those resources. And really, thank you for showing up today. As you know, it matters. It really, really matters. And we are so glad to be doing this work with you. It is tremendously meaningful. wish you a day. So thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.